Welcome to the Power Your Voice podcast. I'm Delane Blazek, clinical counselor turned chief commercial officer and coach. This is where entrepreneurial women learn to grow revenue while staying all in on who they are. We're talking about real-world issues and nothing's held back. Welcome back to the Power Your Voice podcast. Today, I want to talk about a concept that completely changed my career, my confidence, my income, and ultimately my life. It's the idea of becoming the obvious choice. Now, before we get started, let me clarify something. This episode isn't just about making millions, although that is very important and we will get to it. But first, you have to become someone people remember. Because if people remember you, they trust you. And if they trust you, they call you. And if they call you, opportunities begin to show up. And guess what? When opportunities show up consistently, revenue tends to follow. But I didn't always believe that. And in fact, let me start with a secret confession. There was a time in my life when I thought sales was a four-letter word, and I didn't want anything to do with it. When I heard the word sales, it immediately created a mental image in my mind. You know the guy. Tall, thin, gray suit, slick back hair, standing on the used car lot, ready to tell me whatever he thought I wanted to hear in order to influence my behavior in the direction he wanted it to go. And that direction was usually toward the most expensive solution, not the one I needed, definitely not the one I wanted, the one that he wanted me to buy. So sales to me felt like pressure. It felt like intimidation. It felt like persuasion tactics that never seemed to end. And it felt like someone stringing together enough words and enough objections and rebuttals, hoping that eventually I would just break down and say yes. Not because I wanted their solution, but I wanted them to stop talking and go away. Have you ever had one of those experiences? You know, you're standing in the store, you're sitting in a meeting, or you're trapped on an incessant sales call, and you can literally feel yourself pulling away from the conversation because the other person is trying so hard to move you toward a decision. And the harder they push, the more resistant you become. That was my relationship with sales. And because that was my perception of sales, I spent years avoiding it. I convinced myself that if I was talented enough, people would find me. If I worked hard enough, opportunities would show up. And if I delivered great results, the revenue would somehow take care of itself. And while there is some truth to that, there's also a very expensive lie hidden inside of it. And the lie is that being good at what you do automatically guarantees that you'll be rewarded for it. It doesn't. The marketplace is full of talented people who are underpaid, full of experts who are always overlooked, and full of entrepreneurs who have incredible solutions, but struggle to generate consistent revenue. And I know, because guess what? I work with them every day. But I wasn't always this person. I came from a very different geography. It was a super small town with limited options for a woman. I was faced with two top career choices. One, either being a hairdresser, or two, being a secretary. And yes, that was before the term assistant was used. Not that there's anything wrong with either of those, but they weren't for me, and I knew I had other aspirations, even if they literally did not exist at that time. So, I left. I went to the north. I became a counselor. I wanted to help people. I wanted options. I wanted independence. I wanted decision-making power, and mostly, I wanted the freedom to create a life on my own terms. And what I did not want was sales. But then life happened. I had 3 boys and after-hour counseling clients, a calendar that was so packed from sunrise to sunset. And if I'm being honest, I was exhausted. I mean, not tired, exhausted. The kind of exhausted where you sit in your car before walking into the house because you're trying to figure out how you're going to make it through the rest of the evening. I mean the kind of exhausted where you're successful on paper, but quietly wondering if this is really what success is supposed to feel like. And ultimately, the kind of exhausted where you're drinking half a pot of coffee just to make it through the afternoon, only to find that when your day job tasks end, you're presented with the delightful schedule of getting snacks together, making dinner, cleaning up dinner, throwing in a load or 5 of laundry, making sure the kids get bathed, preparing the evening snack, and reading the books to them before putting them to bed. Oh, and you think they'll actually stay in bed? Oh, no. Depending on their ages, they will cry for you to come and get them or simply just leave the bed. Maybe come to your room and start jumping on your bed. And if you're lucky, you might even find yourself falling asleep in a small plastic race car bed alongside one of them just to get them to sleep. And thank you, Jonah, for that in our case. Sometime during this parental bliss, I realized that something had to change. I needed more time, more energy, more income, and again, more freedom. But every path seemed to require the one thing I was resisting: change, then sales. But I had my aha moment. I took the leap of faith and the entry level business development job. And after about 2 weeks, I was certain the problem was not me. The problem was the sales process. Because the more I studied traditional sales methodologies, the more I realized something. Most of them had been written decades ago around behaviors that simply didn't feel natural to me. They emphasized control, persuasion, pressure, repetition. The idea that if you just keep saying the same thing enough times, eventually you'll break somebody down to say yes. Now, let me be clear. I'm not suggesting that objection handling is bad, and I'm not suggesting that closing techniques are bad. And I'm certainly not suggesting that follow up doesn't matter, because it does. All of those skills absolutely matter. I spent decades leading sales organizations and growing revenue. The problem isn't the tools, the problem is how they're often taught. Because there was very little room for the things that came naturally to me, which were connection, curiosity, trust. Let's try on authentic relationships and real problem solving. How about the ability to sit down with another human being and genuinely understand what they're trying to accomplish? I didn't want to win, I wanted to help. And for a long time, I thought that meant I wasn't cut out for sales. But eventually, I realized something. What if the very things I thought were weaknesses were actually strengths? What if my ability to connect quickly with people was an advantage? What if asking thoughtful questions was a good thing and creating trust was important? What if helping someone solve a problem was the highest form of selling? Because when you really think about it, the best business relationships are mutually beneficial. The customer wins, the business wins, the relationship grows, and everybody moves forward together. The old model focused on convincing, and the new model focuses on clarity. Old models emphasize pressure, and new models focus on confidence. What the old model taught us was how to chase, and the new model teaches us how to attract. And that's where everything began to shift for me. I stopped trying to become better at convincing people, and I started becoming better at understanding people, which in my case was pretty natural since I was previously a counselor. We are highly trained to interview people without it feeling like an interview. We are trained to notice the small things that tell us what a person is really thinking. And at that moment, I stopped focusing on what I wanted to sell and I started focusing on what they needed to achieve. I stopped worrying about overcoming objections and I started creating enough clarity that many objections disappeared before they ever surfaced because I uncovered what they really wanted and what the barriers to that would be. And what happened next surprised me. The more authentic I became, the more revenue I generated. The more I leaned into relationships, the more opportunities appeared. And the more I focused on helping rather than persuading, the more the people wanted to work with me. Not because I was the loudest, although I'm loud, and not because I was the cheapest, because I'm expensive, and definitely not because I was the most aggressive, because I'm assertive, but because I had become the obvious choice. Now, let's talk about what that really means. Becoming the obvious choice is not about being better than everyone else. It's not about being louder or having the biggest social media following. And it's certainly not about pretending to be something you're not. Being the obvious choice means understanding three things. First, you understand what matters most to the buyer, not what matters most to you. What outcomes are they trying to achieve and what problems are they trying to solve? Once you know those two things, you can figure out what risks they're trying to avoid and what success looks like through their eyes. Second, understand your own unique identifiers. Why do you need to know this? You need to know what makes you different, not better, different. Why do clients choose you? What do you consistently deliver that other people do not? And what experiences, skills, perspectives, or unique methodologies make you different. Third, understand your competitors. Now, this one's often overlooked and shouldn't be, because if you don't understand the alternatives available to your buyer, how can you possibly help them make an informed decision? Well, you can't. The goal is not to criticize the competition. The goal is to understand the landscape well enough to position yourself honestly and effectively. And then something magical happens. When you understand what the buyer wants, and when you understand what makes you different, and then you understand the competitive alternatives, you can connect the dots. You can educate, create clarity, and you can help someone confidently move toward the right decision. And I hate to break it to you, but sometimes that decision will be you, and sometimes it won't, but that's okay. Because if you're not the obvious choice, don't force the sale. Don't pressure the buyer and don't talk yourself into it. And more importantly, don't talk them into it. The wrong customer eventually becomes the wrong relationship, and the wrong relationship creates frustration for everyone involved. One of the biggest misconceptions about sales is the belief that persistence closes deals. It doesn't. It really gets annoying. And it's not the kind of deals that you actually want. Now, don't get me wrong. Follow-up matters, visibility matters, and consistency matters. But there is a difference between persistence and consistency. Persistence often sounds like just checking in, following up again, circling back, over and over and over again. Consistency is different. It's continuing to show up with value, maintaining visibility, educating and nurturing relationships. Consistency is staying relevant. Most buying decisions don't happen because someone followed up 17 times. Most buying decisions happen because trust was built over time. The right message reached the right person at the right moment with the right solution. That's not persistence. That's consistency. And that creates confidence. The truth is that most entrepreneurs don't need to become more aggressive. They need to become more intentional, because selling doesn't create trust. Trust creates sales. Persistence doesn't create demand. Consistent value creates demand. And when you become the obvious choice, closing becomes easier. Pricing and referrals and growth, all of it becomes easier because you're no longer trying to create fit. You're helping buyers recognize that the fit that already exists. And that's the power of your pay difference. Selling chases, the obvious attracts. Selling pressures, and the obvious creates confidence. Selling discounts, and the obvious demonstrates value. And that shift changes everything. Thank you for joining me today. And until next time, remember, you don't make millions by being the best kept secret. You make millions by becoming the obvious choice. Now, if you're listening to this and thinking, I know I'm good at what I do, but I'm struggling to communicate my value. Or maybe you're thinking, I know I need more revenue, but I don't want to be one of those pushy salespeople. Or perhaps you've built a successful business, but you've hit a plateau and you're not quite sure what the next level looks like. Well, you're not alone. These are exactly the types of conversations that we have every day. And at Power Your Pay, we help entrepreneurs identify their unique identifiers, strengthen their sales process, increase revenue, and build a business that supports the life they actually want to live. Not through pressure and not through manipulation. Because remember, we are not damsels in distress, and it's definitely not through becoming something that you're not, but by helping you become the obvious choice for the people you are uniquely qualified to help. So, if you'd like to explore what's possible for your business, I invite you to schedule a complimentary strategy session with one of our team members. We'll take a look at where you are today, where you're trying to go, and what's getting in the way, and whether or not we are the right fit to help you get there. And if we're not, we'll tell you that too, because the goal isn't to sell everyone. The goal is to help the right people achieve the right outcomes for them. You can learn more and schedule your complimentary strategy session below. The link is in the show notes. Thank you for joining me today. Until next time, remember, you don't make millions by being the best kept secret. You make millions by becoming the obvious choice. Thanks for tuning in to the Power Your Voice podcast. Remember, you're not alone on this journey. You do have what it takes to be a successful woman in business. And if you're ready to step into new levels of success, subscribe, share, and join me next time as we talk about building revenue and the life you actually want. Until then, stay all in and keep powering your voice.